Hi, Paul here, coming to you from Datacom in Christchurch with another of my PowerApps videos. Thanks for watching. So in this session, I'm going to have a look at working in offline mode or disconnected mode, show you how you can set your application up so that you can work with data locally, adding records as well as editing and deleting records, doing that all locally on the device, and then hitting a sync button to synchronize all of your changes back to, in this case, a SharePoint set of lists. So it's quite complex. There's a few different things going on, but I'm going to build the whole thing from scratch. So it'll take us a little while, but hopefully it'll give you a good insight into how to do it. So what we're going to do is we are going to imagine a scenario where a customer looks after a certain set of customers. And they are going to go out, sales reps are going to go out and take orders from those customers, and they don't know if they're going to be connected or not. So it's going to work in offline mode. There are other use cases for this sort of technique as well. So when you're working disconnected, when you're just making all these changes directly on your device or in your web browser even, then it'll be really, really quick because you haven't got any of the overhead of the data transfers backwards and forwards to SharePoint or whatever your data source is. So even if you're in a situation where you know you're always going to have a connection, you might want to have a look at using this technique to speed up some of your screens, speed up some of your forms. So you can imagine, these customer-facing scenarios where you want the interaction on the device to be as quick as possible, and then when you finish with that customer, you can hit a sync button. Or even if you've got a queue of customers, when you finish the last one and you can see that you've got 30 seconds spare, then you can do your sync to make sure that all of your data has gone back to the server. Okay, so that's enough talking. Let's actually build something. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use Access to create my tables. In fact, I've already done it, but I'll show you how I'm doing it. What I'll do is I'll get rid of one of these again and recreate it. So what we can do is we can create our tables. Let's just make sure that one does delete. There we go. We can create our tables in Access and then push them to SharePoint. I just find it a little bit quicker to work that way. So we can create a new table. We can go into the design mode. This is going to be my customer table, if I can type properly. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to have the customer name, which is going to be short text, and I'm going to want to have, let's say, a region for the customer, and I don't need the ID. I want the customer to be the ID, so I'm going to switch the primary key, delete out the ID column, save all of that. I can even put in a few sample customers. We're going to have Wayne Enterprises, and they're going to be in region North, and we're going to have Stark Enterprises, and they're going to be in region North, and we'll have one more which is just going to be Acme, and we'll put them in region South. There we go. So I've got a table with a little bit of sample data in it, and what I can do is I can go to the external data tab in Access, more, SharePoint list. I'm using a site called Paul's Test Site, so I want it to be called customer, and I'm just going to upload that list and its sample data to my site. There we go. So let's jump into the site now. Here we are. So this is the site content, so no customer there yet, but I'll hit the refresh button. And there's my customer list. Fantastic. So let's have a look at these other lists. As I say, we're going to build a system in which we can take some orders. So we're going to have a customer list to choose the customer, an order header where we're going to record, let's put it in design view, easier to see, where we're going to record who the customer is. We're going to use the customer ID for that. We'll record the date of the order, some notes, and I'm going to put the user email against this as well, and I'll explain why in a moment. The order detail then is going to point to the order header ID, so we know which order header is the parent for this detailed record. We're going to select a product ID, that's from this product table, and a quantity. Again, we're going to have the user email in there. And we've got a product table, which is just ID and product name. So just very, very simple. We're going to set up our application so that we pull in our customer list and our product list. Those are going to be static lists. We're not going to add customers or products when we're in the app, but we're going to add orders and order details. Each time you move a table to SharePoint, it'll give you a little report. So this is where I put the customer table into SharePoint, and it's just giving me a little report saying, okay, look, this was your primary key field, but it can't be auto generated. It has to be typed in. It's not an auto number or anything like that. So it's just giving me a little warning. So I'll get rid of that. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to now put my other tables into SharePoint, because right now in SharePoint I've only got the customer list. So let's pop the other tables in. Just a quick note on the other tables. For the IDs, for the order header ID and for the order detail ID, I'm going to use short text fields. I will explain that in a bit more detail later. For my static lists, where I don't want to update any data from within the app for customer and product, I'm happy to use a normal ID. Oh, I haven't even bothered with an ID field for that one. And in fact, I can remove ID from there as well, because they will get an ID column when they move into SharePoint anyway. But for order header and for order detail, I'm putting my own IDs in, which are of the type short text. That will all become clear as we progress. So let me very quickly then do that uploading. So you just need to make sure that your tables are not in design view. You can't upload a table when it's in design view. There we are. So customer's already in, so we'll do order header next then. Make sure it goes to the right site. Fantastic. So there's order header. Again, I've got my little warning about auto-generated values. So that's fine. Don't need to worry about that. So what was that I just put in? Was that order header? Yes. Order detail next then. It's frustrating that you can't select multiple and load them all in one go. I'm sure that used to be an option, but it seems that we have to do them one at a time now. And we'll do product. So obviously you can just create your lists directly within SharePoint. I'm just showing you a little trick that I sometimes use because I find it a little bit quicker to do the design work sometimes in Access and then push the list into SharePoint. So let's go and have a look now at our site contents. So we've got to do a refresh, and now here we are. We've got customer, order header, order detail, and product. That's great. Okay, so now I'm just going to create an Power App to use. Okay, so I'm going to do my Power App in tablet type mode because I want plenty of space on the screen and I want the text to be reasonably readable for you. So that's just why I'm using that particular layout. Okay, so the first thing we've got to do then is go to our data sources, and just add those lists in. So let's do that now. So I'm going to add those all in. So we'll hit the connect. Great. Now what we're going to want, probably on our front screen, are 3 routines. In fact, one of them has to live in the app on start. But we're going to want 3 routines in all. An on start routine, which is going to pull in any cached data from the device. We'll get to that later. A routine which is going to load in the existing data from the server, and a synchronization routine which is going to push any new data or modified data that we've got on the device back to the server. So let's do the first of those. So I'm going to stick a button on, and I'm going to call this button load data from server. Oops. Let's call it btn load data and put the text on it as load data from server. Right, there we go. So what we're going to do is in the on select, we're going to do a clear collect, and we're going to pull in the data for the customers from the server, and we're going to put it into a collection which I'm going to call my customers. Okay, and we're going to bring in the customer data. Let me just make sure that these things match. It isn't critical, but it helps later on when I'm making typos. And we don't actually want to bring in all of the customers because we only want them for a particular region. So I'm going to say filter customer where region equals north. And the reason I'm going to do that is simply because whenever you are loading data into your application, you want to bring in as few rows as you actually need. So in reality, what we would probably have is a table for the users. So you could check, hang on, which is the region for this user, and then you could bring in the relevant region only. I've hard coded it for now just to get the concept across. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click that button, and we're going to go to view and collections just to see what came in. So there we are. Here's my customer. And we can see in there we've got our Wayne Enterprises, our Stark Enterprises, and all of the usual SharePoint columns, the SharePoint fields. So when you do a clear collect from one collection, in this case a SharePoint list, into another, then all of those fields, all of those SharePoint fields are coming into this column, my customer. Great, okay. So what we're going to do now then is we're just going to repeat this for the other fields as well, so that we're bringing in all of the data that we want. So we've got a col product, and for that one I'm just going to bring in all the products. We're not filtering our product table at all. We want all products available in all regions. I'm going to do col my order header here, and we're going to do filter order header where the user email. So remember, in our table here, if I go to order header, we've got a field for user email. So every time we create an order header, we're going to populate the user email field with the user who took that order. And then when we do our loading data from the server, we're only going to pull in the data for that particular user. So we're imagining a scenario here where you're having the same salesperson, rep, whatever, dealing just with their own orders, not having to pick up the orders that someone else has created. And again, this is just to reduce the amount of data that you're having to pull in from the server each time. The more data you pull in, the more time it's going to take. And of course, we are also limited by our delegation limit as well. So the maximum delegation limit you can set is 2,000. The default is 500. So if you're doing one of these sorts of apps where you've got bringing in information to use locally, it's a good idea just to crank that right up to the maximum, and then you don't have to worry about not getting all of the customers or not getting all of the products if there are a great number of them. So as long as there's not more than 2,000, this is going to be fine. If you've got more than 2,000 customers or more than 2,000 products, then you're probably going to have to start thinking about filtering those down so only the relevant products for that particular salesperson come in. Okay, so I was halfway through writing this filter, sorry. So for the my order header, let's get our capitalization right, we're going to bring in the order header information, but only for the current user. So we can get the current user's email by user open bracket close bracket dot email. Right, so that's all looking okay. Why do you not like that? Because I haven't put enough close brackets on. There we go. So yeah, so whenever you're bringing in the data, have a think about applying filters to it so that the synchronizations take less time and so that we're less likely to hit the delegation limits. Now, if we're doing stuff based on the user, we can see we've got a problem here. We've got a delegation warning. But we can get around that delegation warning. Let me show you how. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do an update context to create myself a variable which is scoped to the screen. I'm going to call that con-user email, and I'm going to set its value to user.email. There we go. And then I'm going to use this instead. And you'll find that that delegation warning goes away, because by this point we know that user email is going to be some text, and PowerApps just seems to be happier if we do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to just want to do exactly the same thing again for the order detail. So in terms of naming conventions are good, and the naming conventions I'm using col to represent that it is a collection. I'm using my to indicate that it's been filtered in some way to only give back the data for the, in this case, the user that we want, or here, the customers in a particular region. Okay. So let's hit that load data from server button. Off it goes. I can go to my collections. Now I've got local versions of customer, product, order header, and order detail. I've got some information already in customer and product. My order header and my order detail are currently empty, but we can see that I've got all of the SharePoint columns in there, which will become useful later on. Okay, now a quick tip here. The way I've written this at the moment is that first of all, we're going to pull in all of the customer information, and then when that's finished, we're going to pull in the product information, and then when that's finished, we're going to pull in the order header information, and so on. So the total time that it's going to take for this load data to run is going to be this time plus this time plus this one plus this one. We can make things quicker by wrapping these statements in a concurrent. So concurrent allows you to run multiple statements side by side. Now what we need to do is separate them out with a comma, because now each of these is becoming an argument of the concurrent statement, and then we've got to put our final close bracket on there to close off the concurrent. And now, because all these are running simultaneously, the time it takes is going to be the time of the longest one. So that's going to save you a lot of time when you're building a real app which has got more tables and more data in it. So concurrent, very much worth taking a look at. Okay, so let's hit the button again. There we go. So flashes by very quickly. So now we're loading our data in from the server. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to insert a gallery which allows me to choose a customer for which to create an order. So you've got to remember now that we've brought our information in from SharePoint, so we're not going to reference the SharePoint list. We're going to reference the internal copy of that list, or at least a part of that list if it's filtered, that we've got in PowerApps. So I'm going to base it on call my customer, and I'm going to add a label in there, which is going to be this item dot customer name. So now I can see who my customer is. There we go. So we'll stick with just the 2 customers for the moment. Great. So now I've got a way that I can click on I can see my customers. The next thing is to be able to click on the customer and start taking an order for them and to be populating that order inside our local collections. So let's create a new screen. And in here, I'm going to say when I click on the customer name, what I want it to do is to navigate to screen 2. Now, I'm not bothering to name all of my controls at the moment. In a real application, I definitely would. We'll use cover. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass through to the next screen the details of this customer by saying con for context variable, con customer, and we're just going to set that to this item. So we've got the details of that customer. So that's great. I'm going to click on there and it takes me through to screen 2. What I'll do, just so I can see what's going on, I'm going to add a label here, which I'm just going to set to con customer. Now I need to put a dot after this because con customer is the actual record, because I set it to this item. This item is the whole record. So now what we will do is put in the customer name so we can see which customer we're dealing with. Again, let's make that a little bit easier to see. So we're going to be doing an order for Stark Enterprises. So let's pop a couple of other controls on here because there's a few things we need to record for an order header. So I'm just going to remind myself what goes into order header. So a customer ID, an order date, notes, user email, and an order header ID, which we'll come to in a second. So let's put in the order date and the notes. The other stuff can be hidden. So insert an order date. We're going to want that from a date picker. So here's a date picker. Fantastic. And we will insert a text input box for some notes. There we go. Right. All looking good so far. So I'm also going to put in a button which we can click to confirm to create the order for Stark Enterprises. So when we hit this button, we are going to do a patch. We're going to patch into the My Order Header collection. So patch means write a record or modify a record. In this case, we're writing a new record, and the way we do that is to use the defaults command. And then we start specifying what fields we want to put in. So We need to put in a customer ID. So we can get that from our concustomer.id. We want to put in the order date. And that's going to be my DT. Oh, I haven't renamed them, have I? Date picker 2. I'll rename them in a second. Dot selected date. I'm going to want to put in the text into my notes field. So my note is going to be text input 4. And my user email is going to be user.email. Okay. Just try and match up all of my brackets and things again. So there we are, and we'll call this button btn new order. New order. So that's for creating a new order. Quickly going to rename these because otherwise I'm sure that's going to bother me later. DT order date, and text input 4 becomes order notes. And of course, the nice thing in PowerApps is that once you change the name of something, it changes the name in the formula. So this formula is now much easier for me to read, even easier still if I format the text. Yeah, so it's easier to see what's going on. And I've made a little error there. That should be order notes.text. Best to specify which property you want. Sometimes it'll work without it, but best to be on the safe side. Okay, now there was one other thing that my table needs, and that's going to be the order header ID. Now remember, I'm creating these order headers while I'm disconnected, if you like, from the SharePoint list. I'm creating it in here, this col my order header. Now, I might have a bunch of people using my app, so what ID number should we use? A sequential ID number is going to be a problem because there might be 3 orders in the system now. So I create an order, order number 4, but another user is creating an order that ends up being order number 4 as well. So that's going to be a problem. We need a unique number or a unique identifier for these records. So this is quite common in systems that will work when they're disconnected from the main data source, to have what's called a globally unique identifier. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to generate a unique number. So I'm going to do an update context. I'm going to call this con order header ID, and the way I'm going to create the unique number is I'm going to use the GUID command, globally unique identifier. Some people call that GUID, some people call it GUID. I'm going to call it GUID. You say tomato, I say tomato. The other thing that it's worth doing, I have found, is to wrap that in the text function. So within PowerApps, after a recent update, globally unique identifiers are their own special data type, but that data type isn't recognized by SharePoint. SharePoint just treats it as text. And as we go further through the app, what you'll find is that sometimes you're bringing in the value from SharePoint, in which case it's text, and sometimes you're generating the value inside the app, in which case it's the GUID. So if you just wrap this in text, then you're sure you're always dealing with text, and it just makes things a little bit easier later on. Okay, so now we're going to set the order header ID to con order header ID, that unique number that I've generated. And what I'm also going to do, so that I can see what's going on, I'm going to insert a label in my app, and I'm going to set that to con order header ID. Okay, so we can see there's nothing in there at the moment because we haven't pressed the create a new order button here. So we'll do that in a second. In a real app, then I would disable the new order button until we'd entered all of the necessary information for a new order. But in the interests of time, I'm not going to do that right now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new order, and then I'm going to show you how we can save that new order back into the SharePoint list, and then we'll start going on to order details and other bits and pieces as well. So I'm going to hit the play button here. I'll choose tomorrow's date. I'm going to put in some text. This is an order header, and I'm going to hit the new order button. Yes, I am. Yeah, sorry, I've done the necessary bits. So hit the new order button. So that should have written a new record just locally to my my order header table, and that's the ID number that it's assigned to it. So it doesn't matter that these ID numbers are very long. Remember, it's a random number, and you're never going to get two numbers the same generated. Okay, so I'm going to now look in my collections and look in my order header collection, and we can see that this is an order for customer 2. There are the notes I put in. This is an order header. There's my order header date, and there's my order header ID. So at present, this only exists on my device because I've put it into my local collection. So let's go into the order header table in SharePoint, and we'll see that it is still empty. There's nothing in there. Okay, so let's jump back. We'll put this on our front screen. What we're also going to want to do is have a button which synchronizes our local data back to the server. So let's put that button in. So I'm going to call this button BTN Sync, and we'll just call it Sync there. Fantastic. And now what we're going to do is we are going to say, I'm going to do a collect. It's not a clear collect this time, it's a collect. We're going to send the records that we've got in our local col my order headers into the order headers table list in SharePoint. So it's going to go into order header. What I want to put in there is col my order header. Okay, so because my order header was generated from order header in the first place, I know that all of the fields match. We've got no problem there, just doing a straightforward collect. When you're collecting one collection into another or a collection into a list, then all of the field names and the field type should match. And we know they do because when we did load data, we created our local copy from SharePoint. Okay, now I'm going to hit my sync button. There's something else I need to do here, and I'm going to come back to it, but I'm going to show you the issue first of all. So I'm going to hit my sync button. Lovely, and I'm going to go back into order header, and now I can see the order header that I created. This is an order header. There's the date. It was for customer 2. I'm the user, and so on. We've got all our information in there. Now, what's going to happen if I press the sync button again? Do a refresh. And I would have expected that to put the record in again. Okay, that's interesting, but I wouldn't always trust that to work, because in my local collection, I've still got this, and I've certainly seen before, sometimes when you try and sync again, it ends up putting the same record multiple times in. So what we're going to do is, although it's not causing a problem now, I don't trust it not to cause a problem in the future. So I'm going to filter what I send, and I'm going to only send new records back. Now, how do I know if a record is a new record? Well, look, when I look in my order header, I've only got the fields that I have completed locally on the device. I haven't got, for example, an ID number. Now, anything within SharePoint or that has come from SharePoint will have an ID number. So if I go to product and we look at the ones that we pulled in from SharePoint, these all have an ID. So I'm going to use that fact in here to say I only want to upload records where the ID is blank. Fantastic. Now what I want to do once I've uploaded the record is I want to run this load data from server again, so that I've got all of the latest information, and so that the record that I pushed up, I will see its ID. So if I go to add columns here, show hide, and we put in the ID, we're going to want modified later, so let's pop those both in. Okay, so I want to be able to see that information coming back into the device. So I'm simply going to say select btn load data, and that's going to run all of the code which is sitting behind the on select of the load data button. So let's remind ourselves quickly again, in our collection, my order header is showing us something which is only on the device. Now I'm going to hit my sync button, which is also going to run my load data button. Now when I go into collections, there's my order header with all of the additional information which has been input by SharePoint, and it's telling me that it's got an ID of 1. And that's fine, I can sync as many times as I like now, because my sync says only send data back to the server, or only add data to the server if the ID is blank, and the ID is not blank now, so I can sync as many times as I like, and in my order header I'm only going to have the one record in there. So that's cool. So we're already at a point where we can run in a disconnected mode, create new records, and send those records back to the server, and then we can load all the latest data from the server back into the device. So that's a good start. Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen 2 again now. Now what we're probably going to want to do is whenever we come back to screen 2 is to clear out what was already in there. So this is going to be our taking an order screen, and I'll make a separate screen for modifying and deleting orders later. So this is going to be our taking orders screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to say when this is visible, what we will do is we will do an update context and set our on order header ID to blank, and we're going to do a reset on our txt order notes. Oops. Naming conventions are good. Try and stick to them, just like I didn't. Right, okay, so let's do that again. Here we are, txt order notes, and we're going to reset the dt order date. There we are. I think that's the only two things that we're doing there, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to reset those values each time we come in, because this is our creating a new order screen. So let's just do that. I'll go and do one for Wayne Enterprises now. Load. So now we've got an empty one, so we can create a new order. So I'll tell you what, I will go ahead and create an order there. And then we're going to want to be able to add product to the order. So I am going to insert we'll make it a combo box for the products, CBO product. The items property for that is going to be col product, and the fields that we want to use are going to be, I think I called it product name. Product name, yeah. Product name has to be inside the there we go. Okay, that's better. So we'll use product name for the display and the search field, and the other property we're going to want to set is to say that we can only select one item. So we're going to add our products one item at a time. So let's just see, yeah, those are our products. And then we're going to add a text input box so that we can put in the quantity of the product that we're going to order. And we're going to change the format of that to be a number. We're going to change the name to txt quantity. So now we've got somewhere where we can record the product that we want to add and the quantity of the product. We'll just give ourselves a little add icon so that we're then adding that on. So when we select this, we're going to do a patch. We're going to do a patch into col my order details. So order detail is what product and how many. We're adding a record, so we use the defaults instruction, and we have to specify the collection again. And now we can start putting in the fields. So we're going to need check our fields first of all for order detail. Easier to see them in design view. Right. So my order detail ID, remember we need a unique ID for this. What we're going to do is we're going to use our old friend, the GUID, and then our order header ID is going to be our con order header ID. So that's the order header ID we generated for this order, which is stamped against this order. And then I'm going to need a product ID. I'll call that product ID, and we're going to set that to whatever we've selected in the combo for product, CBO product dot selected dot ID. There we are. Oops. ID, and then we also need the quantity, which is going to be what we've got in that quantity text box, txt quantity.text. And it's upset there, I think, because, yeah, it's even giving us the information there. It's saying, hang on a minute, you're setting quantity, which is a numeric field, to the value that you get from txt quantity.text. Now, even though I've set that to be only accepting of numeric values by using those properties on the right hand side there, I said set the format to number, I've still got to make sure I change the data type from text to a number by wrapping this in the value statement, and that will convert it into a number. Right, so now let's see what's happening. So Wayne Enterprises are going to order some batarangs. We're going to have 10, and we're going to click the plus button. So when we click the plus button, it should have done all this patching for us. So let's just go have a little look. Let's go to our collections and order detail. And what did we do? We ordered 10 batarangs. Batarangs are product ID 1. Let's just double check that. Product. okay, because they're in SharePoint now, so SharePoint will have assigned the ID. So let's go check it in SharePoint. So site contents and the product, and we'll have to show that column. There we are. Sorry, all a bit long-winded, but Batarang is indeed ID1. Okay, so at the moment we can't actually see that, so let's give ourselves a gallery. And I'm going to set the items for the gallery as being col my order details, but we only want it for the current order. So we're going to filter it to where the order header ID is equal to con order header ID. And now we can drop some labels in there. So we'll have a label. So this item dot product ID, and oops, we'll have the quantity over here. So item dot quantity, and then over here we'll do a lookup on this. So we're going to look up in the col product, and we want it where the ID equals product ID, and the value that we want to get back is the product name. There we go. So there we are. So there we've got our 10 Batarangs. Let's put something else in this order as well. I think we might need a new bat suit. Let's have one of those. Just tidy up our template size here. There we are. And we'll have 5 lots of shark repellent. So obviously if I were taking time over this application, after adding each of these I would reset the quantity box, but you know, this is just to run you through some concepts quickly. Okay, so let's go back to our view and our collections and our order details. So now we can see that we've got our orders in place. And so when we go back to screen 1 and we want to do a sync, we're bringing back in the order headers at the moment, but we're going to want to have another line for bringing in the, or sending back to SharePoint, the order detail. So send back to SharePoint's order detail list, call my order detail. So you see how we're starting to get warnings come up. Customer ID doesn't exist because I've got a mismatch of order detail and order header. So as long as these all match, we're all good. And the other thing that we would want to do there, of course, is make sure that those two commands run concurrently so that everything goes nice and quick. Now, once we start getting lots of closed brackets and things going on, I like to use that format text option because then we can see which brackets match with which commands. There we go. So that's going to synchronize my information back. So let's hit the sync button. There we go. So that should be sending my information back. We then also load back the data from the server. So let's see what's happened on the server. So yeah, I've got 2 order headers in there now. And if we go and have a look at our order details, there we've got our order details for those 3 order lines that we've just put in. And when we come back into here and we view our collections, why have I got nothing in my order detail? My order detail should be populated. Let me just see what I've done wrong there. I did say at the beginning that there were lots of places where this could go a little bit wobbly. So we definitely sent the information to SharePoint because there it is. Why can't I see the information from SharePoint back inside here? Oh, did I forget to put the user email in my patch statement? Let's check that out. Yeah, look, see, no user email in there. So let's quickly jump back to my patch statement. That was the one on this button, so I left a column off. We want to say user email should be set to user.email. Because remember, when we're loading the information in, we're only loading our information to try and cut down on the amount of rows that we're bringing in. So I forgot to stamp those records with my user email. So I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to quickly just delete out the data from order detail and order header. So we've got something nice and clean to work with. And we'll jump back in here again. So no data in there at the moment. Stark Enterprises. I'm going to place an order, a new order. And they're going to place an order for iron armor for 5 of them. Boom. And I haven't got the other buttons on here at the moment. But then we'll put an order in for Wayne Enterprises. What I'll just do while I think about it is set the on visible of this, now that I've got a few more fields on there, to also reset my combo and reset my txt quantity. And I'll tell you what, as I've already typed that out, I'll pop that reset of the txt quantity on here as well, so each time the number is cleared out again. Okay, so that should be our order for our 5 lots of iron armor. And we'll go to Wayne Enterprises now, and we'll have a big order for them. So again, we're going to have 5 batarangs. Oops, hit plus button, and 1 new bat suit, and 2 lots of shark repellent. Great. Okay, so back to our synchronization screen, and I'm going to hit the sync button. And I'm just going to check what is in my order details. There we are. Got a load of order details now that I remember to put my user email against them. And we should have order headers there as well. Oh, let's hit the refresh on that. There we are. Did I only place 1 order? Okay. Right. So let me just have a little look here. So my order header has not come in for these 3 rows. I didn't hit the confirm order button, did I? Okay. Apologies. I'll show you what I mean. Right. Yeah. So I said if this were a real app, to stop me making mistakes, I would make this stuff disabled until a new order had actually been put in. So here we are. All this stuff was created with no order header against it. So that's easy enough to stop us from making that mistake again. So apologies, in the interest of time, I didn't bother to do this, but now I'm going to do it. So if we haven't hit the new order button, then our order header ID, our context variable for our order header ID, is going to be blank. So what I can do here is I can say if is blank, if is blank, con order header ID, then make these disabled, otherwise make them enabled. Sorry, it isn't it, because it's the display mode. There we go. So I cleared that back out again. Apologies for that. But here we go. So I'm going to do my load data. I'm going to go Stark Enterprises. So I can't make the mistake now and start typing things in there until I've actually created the order here. So I won't bother putting in any text this time, but I'm going to create my new order. Now I'm going to order my iron armor. That's done. And I'll put a back button in a moment. We'll go to Wayne Enterprises, new order, and this is where we're going to want to put in our Batman stuff. Cool. So now let's jump back to our sync screen, and I'm going to hit the synchronize button. So this time, hopefully, our order details all come in with order detail and order header, and we've got our order headers in there. So apologies for that little mistake there. Okay, so that's kind of cool because we can now create records when we're disconnected, and we can, as we saw there, create records for multiple customers, and it's just when we hit the sync button that gets pushed to SharePoint. So what about if we need to modify or delete some of records as well? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new screen, and this is going to be for modifying orders. In a real app, I would probably try and repurpose this existing screen so I could use it for new and existing, but it's going to be a little bit easier here with the formulas just to have these things separated out. So let's pop in a gallery. And in the gallery, I'm going to put in my list of order headers. So this is going to be based on col my order header. And the things I want to put in here is obviously going to be who the customer is. So here I've got the customer ID. I'm going to do this with a lookup again. Now, if you are doing lookups and you are doing lookups to data which is on SharePoint or on your external data source, then they can be very slow because they all sort of operate one at a time. And if you've got a gallery with lots of items, you can actually see it sort of churning through them and things populating. Because we're working with the data locally, that's not going to be a problem for us. It's going to be very quick to do these lookups because there's no trip to the server and back to fetch the data. The data's already here. So I'm going to look up in col my customer where the ID equals this item's customer ID, and we're going to bring back the customer name. There we are. So let's make that a little bit bigger. Make that clearer for us to see. There we are. And let's put in our order notes. Oops, hate it when it does that. It's copied and pasted the text rather than copying and pasting the text box or label. Right, there we are. And then we'll have this item dot order date, and there we are. Drag those up nicely. So now I can see the orders here on the left, and I'm going to make it so that I can see the order details on the right. I'm going to save myself a little bit of time. I'm going to grab that gallery that we've already created over here for showing products and quantities, and I'm going to drop it on this screen. Move it over the side there, and I am going to say filter my order detail. I haven't got a context variable for order header. I want it to be the selected item from the gallery. So this gallery here is gallery 7 dot selected dot order header ID. There we go. So there we are. So Stark Enterprises ordered the iron armor and Wayne Enterprises ordered all this Batman type equipment. So cool. We're now going to add the option to delete items. So if we want to cancel one of these order lines. So let's show you how we can do that. I am going to pop in a little cancel or delete type icon. I'm going to make it red because deleting you want to be careful about. So when we click this cross, let's have a little think about what can happen. If I haven't yet sent this information to SharePoint, I can just remove it from my collection. It doesn't matter because it only exists on the device. But if it exists on SharePoint, what I need to do is not remove it, but mark it in some way so that I can hide it from this gallery, and also when I do the sync, I can send an instruction to SharePoint to get rid of that record. So let me show you how we're going to handle that. So when we click on this, when we select it, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to check whether this has been saved to the server or not. And we know it's saved to the server if it has an ID. So we're going to check if it has an ID. So if this item.id, and I always do this back to front, if is blank this item.id, then it hasn't gone to the server and we can just remove it. We can just say remove this item. Yeah. Sorry, I've got to put the call my order detail in there, this item. That's right. So the remove is where do you want to remove it from? What item do you want to remove? So if it's not gone to SharePoint, we can safely remove it from the local collection. But what if it has gone to SharePoint? So let's fill in our else. If it's gone to SharePoint, we need to mark this record in such a way that we can pick it out later when we're doing our sync and easily get rid of it from SharePoint. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to patch call my order detail. The record I want to patch is this item. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the modified date. So remember, we're using SharePoint, so everything that goes into SharePoint ends up with a modified date, and that modified date gets overwritten anytime it's modified. So I'm going to use this column, and I'm going to set it to my own date value, which has got special meaning to me. I'm going to say the 1st of Jan 3000, because we're not likely to ever get that date in SharePoint as a legitimate one. So I'm marking that as being something that I want to delete. So let me just go to my view collections and my order details. Look at my modified dates. They're all sensible modified dates at the moment. They all went in at the same time because it was when we did the synchronize. So now I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit the button. It's not going to be removed because it's on the server. The modified date is going to be changed. So let's go check. One of my order details should now have a modified date of, there we are, 1st of January 3000. Couldn't see it for a moment for looking. There we are. So that's done what I want. Now I can still see it in here because I just said, look, give me the stuff in my order detail table for this order header. So I need to modify this filter a little bit now. So I'm going to say, and where the modified is not date value 1st of Jan 3000. And now once I get my formula right, then the row that we marked as deleted should disappear. And the thing I've done wrong again is I haven't put my quotes around my date. There we are. So now there's only 2 items in there because one of them is marked for deletion. So your user can now merrily work away, and when they click on the cross, the item will disappear, whether or not that item has previously been saved to SharePoint. But of course, now what we need to do is we need to go back to our synchronization button, and we need to say, hang on a minute, it's possible to delete orders as well. So all of the new orders, all of those with a blank ID, get added. What we're going to do is we're going to remove some now. Okay, now when you do everything inside the concurrent, all the commas and brackets get a bit confusing. That is the way that you would want to do it, but again, for the purposes of saving a bit of time and not making too many mistakes, I'm just going to do it in its own statement underneath the concurrent for the moment. So I now want to find all of those records that are marked for deletion. So for everything in col order detail, need to put a filter on that. For everything in col order detail where the modified date is equal to date value 1 Jan 3000. So for all those items, I want to do a remove if, and we're removing from order detail. Oh, let me just put the my order detail there. That will stop it complaining a little bit. Remove from my order detail where the ID of this item in order detail matches the ID of this one in col my order detail where the date value is the 1st of Jan 3000. Now the problem that we have there is that PowerApps is going to assume that both of these IDs are in the order detail table, and in that case the order detail ID in the order detail table is always going to match the order detail ID in that table, and it's just going to delete everything. So we need to be able to disambiguate, they call it. We need to say, hang on a minute, this ID is the ID from here, and this ID is the ID from here. Now, there's different ways, but the way that I find easiest is I say rename columns in here, and I want to rename the ID column, and I'm going to call this the deletion ID. That's the ID of the record that I want to delete. So now I can put this down here, and now it's clear what's going on. Okay, so anytime the field name matches something which is in the inner collection, then it's going to use the one which is in the inner collection. So yeah, disambiguation. Right, now let's see if that is going to work. So remember, we are going to be getting rid of this one. That's its date, and the quantity on that one was 5. Oh, we've got several with 5, but look, we've got 4 orders at the moment. So when we look in our order detail, there's 4 orders. When we hit the sync button, then one of those should get removed so that we only have 3 orders. So hit the sync button, boom. Let's have a little look in order detail, and there we are. We're down to 3 orders instead. Cool. So let's jump back into screen 3 again. So now we're in a situation where we can add records when we're disconnected offline, and we can delete records. Let's now do modifying a record. So it's going to be very, very similar concept, but we'll do it quickly. So I'm just going to delete out the label and replace it with a text input box instead so that we can change it. I'm going to set the default value, let's do it here, the default value to be this item dot quantity. There we are. Set the format to be a number. And then I'm going to say when I change this, then patch the underlying record. Now, there's a handy thing which is delay output. We're going to set that to true. If you don't do delay output, then as you're typing, it will be writing records. You don't want that. You want to say, okay, when I've finished typing, and moved away from that text box, then you can go ahead and run your onChange event. So in the onChange, I'm going to do a patch. I'm patching to call my order detail. The record I want to modify is this item. I want to patch my quantity, and I want that to be, oh, I haven't named my box. Let's name the box quickly. TXT quantity. Oh, I've already got a TXT quantity. All right then. TXT order quantity. And we've got to say .text, and we've got to remember to wrap it in a value statement to make sure that we're only passing numeric values through. Just get my curly brace in there. Okay, so that's fine. That would modify the quantity, which is great, but I need something so that when I'm doing my synchronization, that change will get pushed to SharePoint. At the moment, that change would just be lost because we're only dealing with things where the ID is blank or where the modified date is 1st of Jan 3000. So let's use the modified date again as a way of letting or marking the record for special treatment. So where the date value is 1st of Jan, and I'll make it 3001 this time. So you'll want to come up with a convention that makes sense to you, that you can remember. Let me just see what I've got wrong on here. Why have I got the word patch there again? There we go. Right. Yeah, so now I am marking the record. Oh, and remember, this record might not actually have gone to SharePoint yet, so we need to deal with that situation as well. So let's do our little check first of all and say if is blank this item.id, then we don't need to worry about telling SharePoint to get rid of it. We can just do a straightforward patch with the quantity. Get rid of that. Get all my braces in the right places again. There we are, the format text, so it's easier to read. So if this is a record which is on the device only, it's not gone to the server yet, you can just go ahead and modify the quantity. Otherwise, then you're going to want to modify the quantity and the modified date so that we know we've got to do something special with this record when we do the synchronization. There's other ways of writing this statement. We could have the if statement inside the modified bit. instead. I'll tell you what, I'll do that. Let me just drop this into Notepad in case I screw things up. But the other way of writing this one would be do the patch, and for the modified, if is blank this item dot ID, then we can set the modified value to blank or leave it at blank. Otherwise, then we can set the date value. So up to you which is neater. There's certainly a little bit less formula here, so that's probably the preferable version, but they'll both do the same thing. Okay, so let's change the number of bat suits we are ordering. We decide that we only need 1 bat suit instead of 2, so I'm going to change that to 1. I'm going to check my collection for my order detail. So this will be the line, this one here with the quantity of 1. So that should have a modified date, wherever it is. There we are. Modified date of the 1st of Jan 3001. So this was an existing record. So we need to change the record on the server. So we know what we need to change the quantity to, and we know which record we need to change. So let's jump back to our synchronization screen. So here we can see we've got our for all, which is going to go through all of the records which have been marked for deletion because they've got a modified date of 1st Jan 3000, and we go through and delete them. We're now going to do pretty much exactly the same thing, but for the records which have a modified date of 3001, but we're not going to be deleting them, we're going to be updating them. So I'll call that update ID, and we don't want to remove here. What we want here is a patch, and so we're going to be patching to order detail. The record that we want to be patching is where the ID, so we've got to do the lookup, haven't we? Lookup where the order detail ID equals the update ID. So that's going to identify the record that we want to change. And then the thing that we want to change about it is we want to change the quantity to, oh, and I think we're going to have to, oh no, we're good. We can just say quantity here because it can only come from the one place. So what's not happy here? The patch statement has some invalid, okay, there we are, quantity. I left a T out. And that's got a problem there. We probably need another bracket to close off that for all statement. Again, I recommend using the format text so that you can see where all of your brackets are matching up. Okay, so let's go back to our order detail. So at the moment, we've still got 2 bat suits ordered because we haven't yet synchronized our information. So in here, in our device, here we are, we've changed our batsuit order to only 1 batsuit, but that's just local because we haven't pressed the sync button yet. So back to here, press the sync button. And we should find, if I go back to my order detail and refresh, there we are, that our quantity changed from 2 back down to 1 again. So we've now got an app where we can load our data in from the server. We can add records and they get pushed back to the server. We can edit existing records and we can delete existing records. And when we sync, those changes get pushed back to the server as well. So that's all looking pretty good. So this is all working in what we might call disconnected mode, can be offline. The problem we've got is if we are truly offline and we're working away on a device, we're out in the field with our mobile and we've taken a record, we can't press the sync button because we're offline. What happens when we close the app? Well, we would lose all of our data, all of our changes. So what we need to do next is we need to persist the changes to our device. And I keep saying device here because you can only persist your data in the PowerApps player. So you can't do it in a web browser. So that's one thing to remember. And the other thing to keep in mind is at the moment, the Windows PowerApps player is broken and it won't let you start apps when you're offline. It's a known bug. It's been a known bug, unfortunately, for quite a number of months now, but it is something which has been acknowledged and it is supposed to be being worked on and fixed. But for the moment, if you want to be able to run your apps offline and store data on the device until you're back in connectivity, then you're going to have to use iOS or Android. Okay, so what we're going to do next then is we are going to say whenever we pick data up or whenever we change data, we're going to save that data locally on the device so that if PowerApps closes down and then starts up again and we're not able to get an internet connection, then we can just pull the information directly off the device itself. So let's show you how we're going to do that. And I've got a little bit of code here, which I'll drop in the comments, but is the code that I tend to use. I didn't write it myself. I got it off the PowerApps community forum. This is a bit of code which is going to tell you whether the SaveData function is supported on the device that you're using or not. So we're going to run this once to populate a global variable that tells us whether we can save data or not. Otherwise, every time we try to save data, if we're working in a web browser and we try to save data, we're going to get errors coming up. So this way, you've only got to do the test once. Okay, so this is going to attempt to save the data and bring it back again. And if it works, then save data is supported. If it doesn't work, then save data isn't. So I'm going to use the save data command. So save data is going to take one of my collections, or any collection, and it's going to save it locally onto the device using the device storage. Now, you used to be limited to only 20 megabytes of data per app for offline storage, but a recent update has taken that limit off. So you don't have to worry too much now about how much data you're storing. It's dependent on how much data you've got available on the device you're using rather than a limit in PowerApps. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying save the data for call my customer into a file, if you like, on my device, and I'm going to call that SD for save data my customer. Now you'll see that these, if you want to call them file names, are just in double quotes. So you've got to be really careful not to get mismatches in the names. So come up with a naming convention that works for you, stick with it, possibly even, put all the names into a text editor and then copy and paste them so you don't get any problems, because they're a swine to try to figure out later. So that's saving my customer data. I'm next going to save call product. And then we're going to save my order header. And finally, we're going to save my order detail. Okay, so now when we're running the load data from server command, we load all the data in, to memory, and also we're saving it all out as files, so that if the next time we start up, we're offline, we can just pull the data from here instead. So at this point, you're going to want a routine in the on start of your app. And what it can do is it can check to see whether you are online or not. So let me grab my Am I Online code. So here I'm creating a variable called var online mode, and it's checking to see whether we have a connection, either a standard connection or a metered connection. And then we can say if var online mode and var is save data supported. So sorry, what I want to do is say if our online mode is false. So if we're not online but save data is supported, then what we want to do is we want to use the load data command. We're going to load data into call my customer from SD my customer. And I guess what we could do here is we could actually just pull all these into here, overwrite that one, and just change all the save datas with load datas. There we go. So when the app starts up, if you're not online, but saving data is supported on the device you're on, then go check to see and load in data that you may already have on your device. And what we're going to need to do as well is oops, I should have wrapped this one in an if as well. If var is save data supported. So if save data is supported, then go ahead and do all of those. And what we then have to do is we have to say, look, everywhere where we're saving data, where we're doing our patches, where we're making modifications to our local data, then if save data is supported, then go ahead and make sure that my data is also saved to the device, so that if I turn the device off or close PowerApps before I have a chance to sync, then all that data is still going to be there. So on the plus button there, on the on select, we're going to do the same thing, except this time it's my order detail. And jump onto this screen, and there are two places on this screen where we're making changes. We're doing it on the delete button, and we're doing it on the on change event of the text box. Okay, so there are all the changes where all the places where we're making changes. So every time we make any sort of change to the data, when we're loading the data in or when we're modifying any of the data, then we're going to save it to the device, so that if the device gets switched off or PowerApps gets shut down, whatever, the next time you start PowerApps up again on that device, it's going to pull all that data back in for you, so you're not going to have lost anything. Right, one other little thing that I like to do is to show the user how much stuff they've got just locally on their device that hasn't yet been synchronized. So let me show you how I do that. So I'll put it on this first screen again. I'm just going to pop a gallery on over here on the right hand side, and we're going to populate this gallery with a table that we generate ourselves, which is going to tell us how many records we've got that are pending being written to SharePoint, how many new records, how many modified records, and how many deleted records. So the user can see, hang on a minute, I've got data here which hasn't yet gone to the server, and how much data. So, right, I have a thing called label, and we're going to say this one is for the order header. So how many order headers have we generated? So how many new order headers have we got? It is going to be count rows of call my order header, but filtered where is blank ID. How many modified have we got? Well, we didn't allow modification of the headers. Okay, got something not quite right there. What have I done? Okay, I've closed off the filter but not closed off the count rows. There we are. Modified, and then how many deleted? Well, as I say, for this one, it's going to be 0. But then on the next row, we're going to deal with the order details. So here we are, label order details, call my order detail. And let's separate these out a little bit so it's a bit easier to work. So the number of modified records is going to be, we're going to count our rows again, but this time for modified, we're going to count our rows where our modified column equals date value 1 Jan 3001 for the modified ones. Date value, there we go. And then for the ones that are deleted, it's going to be where it is, 3000. Okay, so that should build up a little table for me, and now in here I can simply add a label. Oops. Come on, clear some of these things off the screen. I don't need that anymore. Okay, there we are, order header, order detail. So let's get these in. So that's going to be this item dot new, and copy paste that. This item dot modified, and this and this one will be deleted. And obviously I'd put labels up at the top so that we could see which thing was which. So yeah, let's do our load data from server. Okay, so we've got nothing on the device which is not on the server. I'm going to start putting some more orders in. Remember that little thing I said about how very annoyingly, when we're in design mode, combo boxes, if you've messed around at all with their items property, I mean, even though you haven't been into the formula and changed it, what you've done is you've changed something about the collection. We refreshed the collection, we've cleared it out and repopulated it. And so it says, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to screw up all of your display and search fields for you. So do watch out for that. So let's order some items here. And then what we'll do is we'll jump back to our screen 1 and we can see, look, I've got 1 new order header and 3 new order details. Okay, I'm going to do a sync on that information. And then I'm going to go into screen 3 and I'm going to delete an item and I'm going to change the quantity of an item. And then again, when we jump back to screen 1, we can see we've deleted one and we've modified one. So yeah, helps if you've got the labels on, but remember it was new, modified and deleted. Cool. So we've got a little red dot appearing on here. We haven't got any little red dot on our app checker because that is a runtime error. And the runtime error is that there was a problem saving your data. Remember, I'm working in a web browser and we said that when you try to save data, try and use the save data command in a web browser, you get an error back because save data is not supported when you're in a web browser. So don't worry about that little red button there. It is annoying that save data isn't supported because what it means is when you're developing, to make sure that everything is working properly, you've got to work on your app in the studio on the web browser, then you've got to publish it, then you've got to pick up your mobile device, you've got to make sure that you've loaded the latest version of the Power App on there, and then you've got to do all your testing on there. And then if there's a problem, you've got to come back to the web studio, make your changes and push them backwards and forwards. It is a painful process. So it did take me a while to get all this working the way that I wanted, but I have now, so I have shared it with you. Yeah. Okay. So as I say, that is working disconnected or working offline. Offline has obvious benefits. You can still carry on working when you've got people out in the field who may not have an internet connection, but you may want to consider also using this method just to make it faster when you're working on your record. So it's very quick and easy for me to add things here. If I had this set up so that every time I was hitting the plus button, it was writing values back to SharePoint, then it wouldn't be as quick as that. So as soon as I'm hitting the plus, the items are being added to my list. There's no delay there. I'm not having to wait for any activity lights to work their way slowly across the screen. Everything is bang, instant, really, really quick, with the added advantage that if you are going to be working offline, then you've just got to make sure that you put in these save data commands everywhere where you're making a modification, and you make sure that you've got your load data commands on the start property of the app itself. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a fairly marathon session. Thank you very much if you stayed through all the way to the end. Please give me a like, please drop me a comment. That encourages me to keep making these videos, to know that people out there are actually getting some kind of benefit from them. Okay, thank you very much indeed, and happy power apping.